Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, students and members of the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy, very happy to welcome you today for the first day of the conference Film for Peace, the power of film and the arts to build peace. Ladies and gentlemen, I think as director of the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy, try to reflect on which medium is perhaps the most powerful today in terms of actually winning the hearts and minds of others, or actually accessing the hearts and minds of others. Film, I think, is really one of the best examples that I can think of. If there's one favorite pastime probably that we all share, it is film. This is a video I'll show in a few moments. You can ignore it for now. But if there's one medium that I think really does, that we all have access to, it's film. Not only the Hollywood films, of course. We were discussing last week with some of the students, Bollywood, of course, Nollywood. You have many film ministries around the world. And I think what's great with film is it really is something accessible for almost all around the world, getting more accessible every day. Through the internet, through the possibility, whether it's YouTube or other mediums, to share film or also segments of film. And I think that is a chance that we've actually not had in centuries before or even decades before. So there's a special potential that I'd like us to really think about seriously during the next few days. Of course, cultural diplomacy as a whole is really at the heart of our work here at the Institute. But specifically this week, parallel to the Berlinale Film Festival, we wanted to take the chance to reflect what possibility is there for film to reach actually audiences around the world. The example I wanted to share with you very briefly today, I only really want to do about a 15-minute introduction before our first keynote speaker of the day, is to maybe just ask two questions. One of them I can answer in part now, the other that hopefully we can answer throughout the course of the next few days. First of all, how has film in the past served as a vehicle for cultural diplomacy? And then the second question I want to talk about the next few days with you all, with the help of our speakers coming from around the world, is how can film today actually transcend borders and bring cultures and countries together? So the first example I want to begin in an easier way for us to just begin the discussion on film as cultural diplomacy. I want to take an example from the past. I'm not sure if everyone in this room knows about this, but as part of the Marshall Plan here in Germany, the Americans and actually the Canadians were not only giving money to Germany, but they were really in many ways trying to assist in the transition in Germany to what their perception was of actually democracy, capitalism, etc. So it was a very fascinating period for not only economic reconstruction of Germany and Europe, but also philosophical in that sense. And one of the things I didn't realize, actually, until fairly recently, one of our advisory board members alerted me to this about 5 or 6 years ago, was actually the Marshall Plan films. And I don't know if you've heard of this, but there was actually a segment of the Berlinale a few years ago called Selling Democracy, where they actually highlighted these Marshall Plan films. And what's interesting with the Marshall Plan's films is in many ways they were trying to do exactly that. Sell democracy. So it's a fascinating example where you actually had governmental support of films, not with the idea of tricking the Germans, so to speak, but really of trying to get them excited about, at that time, very new ideas. Whether it's ideas of mass production, free trade, capitalism, all of these ideas, they actually packed into movies, believe it or not. Today, I'm not sure if this is still practiced. I don't think it is, at least publicly, when it comes to Hollywood or governmental intervention. But at that time, it was very normal, and in many ways, most would look at it as a success. As you look today at the Marshall Plan, many are referring, we need a Marshall Plan in Tunisia, or we need a Marshall Plan here, we need a Marshall Plan there. So I think most do actually refer to the Marshall Plan as a success. And I think a lot of it had to do not only with the economics, but also with the cultural diplomacy angle. So it's a fairly simple example, but I wanted to share with you maybe 5 minutes of one of my favorite Marshall Plan films, which is actually called The Shoemaker and the Hatter. So I'm just looking here. We have a German as well as a English summary. This is actually taken from the website of the Deutsche Historisches Museum. So in case any of you would like for homework this evening or the next few days to learn more, you can see a lot of these films in their full length for free on the website of the Deutsche Historisches Museum. You can also Google Selling Democracy or Marshall Plan films. So let me just tell you briefly about this film, which is from 1950, initially produced in Great Britain. A prize-winning color cartoon made by the same husband and wife team that later turned Orwell's Animal Farm into a classic of animated storytelling. This film was about two neighbors, a shoemaker and a hatter, who argue about the best way to recover their livelihoods after the war. The hatter believes in producing a few hats at a high profit per hat, protected by tariff. The shoemaker sees the need for lots of shoes. He wants to lower their cost through mass production and make his profit through export and free trade. After many adventures, the shoemaker eventually proves that free trade can bring prosperity to them both. Since the free trade versus protectionism argument is still in today's headlines, the film is as fresh as ever. One of the most popular of the Marshall Plan films, it has been shown in 11 language versions in movie houses throughout Western Europe. So an interesting idea, I'll show you just to whet your appetite, maybe the first 5 minutes, to see how through a cartoon, in this case, the Americans were trying to sell democracy, or actually practice culture diplomacy with a very specific purpose at a very specific time in the history of Germany as well as of Europe. So the shoemaker and the hatter. Actually, the sound, Esteban, are you sure the sound is turned on? I don't think so. All right, well, we'll start the movie, okay? We will trust in your hands. I don't think so, Esteban. Should I unplug the cable for the sound?
Traders lived side by side. A shoemaker.
Okay. If you could lower the lights a little too, Esteban. The spotlights, Esteban.
In a certain street, two traders lived side by side. A shoemaker and a hatter. Time they had been out of business. But now the two shops were almost ready to trade once more. The hatter decided that as felt was scarce and dear, he would make only one hat per week and charge a fabulous price for it. The shoemaker thought otherwise. The country had plenty of good leather and a tradition of good craftsmanship. Business was brisk. Even so, the shoemaker had only enough money for food. Meanwhile, the hatter was scheming. If there was any outside competition, he knew he couldn't sell his one expensive hat. So he wrote a petition. And got the other hatters to agree. It was a very simple request. A large tax on imported hats, and the money obtained to swell the city exchequer. Could he resist boasting of his triumph? The shoemaker wondered whether he wasn't a fool to work so long for so little. Why not be like the hatter? But when shoes are needed so badly, surely he should make more, not less. Why not make more shoes with less effort by using more machines? That would mean better shoes and cheaper shoes. Of course, that's the answer. And now's the time to act. First, he had to go to His Excellency for permission to import new machinery.
So I'm going to stop it there, and just I wanted to whet your appetites. As I said, my idea today was really just to give you a brief overview to hopefully whet your appetites in terms of film as culture diplomacy. I don't want to take away more time from our next speaker. But if you are interested in this, perhaps in the framework of this event, we may have a little bit more time to look at this in more depth. Just let us know, or let my colleague Radostina know, if you would be interested in that. Otherwise, as I said, it's free of charge on the internet. The website of the Deutsches Historisches Museum, or if you just Google Marshall Plan films, it'll come up relatively easily. So what I wanted to show you in these very brief opening remarks is that this is not a new idea, film as culture diplomacy, but I think the international situation today is very new, and I think the techniques that we use to deal with this global situation need to adapt as well. So if we were to just send a film like this to Afghanistan today or to Syria, probably it wouldn't necessarily help to improve the situation. So of course we have to be very careful to see what are the methods that are appropriate for different contexts. So the only point I wanted to make here is a fairly small point. If one looks at a very specific period in time, the after-war period in Germany and in Europe, where we were really trying to reconstruct many things. At that point in time, this is looked upon as a success story. We can debate that later on as well. Can we take this technique and put it somewhere else? I don't know. That's for you to decide, not for us. And that's why you're all here, to hopefully learn more and gain new insights in the framework of this event when it comes to film as culture diplomacy. The conversation I'm looking forward to having with you later in this conference is really what techniques might we consider today, if any techniques at all. And we can also debate, is there a benefit of having some sort of a preloaded goal, to make a film with a certain purpose? Or is it better to just have art for art's sake and let it actually serve as a provocateur or a catalyst in its own way? That's another debate. Here it's an interesting idea, really, a governmentally funded film with the purpose of convincing a certain audience of a certain thing. Is that appropriate or not? I don't know. That's again for us to decide. Or is it better just to have a filmmaker who is inspired by a certain topic and he just makes a film? That's another debate. We had a discussion with our graduate students last week on exactly that point. Is there some sort of a benefit sometimes of civil society serving as the prime actor as opposed to governments, perhaps to be freed from governmental agendas, even though I don't think they're freed from all agendas. We also had the conversation that neutrality doesn't really exist when it comes to international relations or culture diplomacy. So I will stop there. I wanted, as I said, just to show you a little bit why we as an institute really are quite interested in film as culture diplomacy from its past uses as well as its possible future applications. And it's really in that historic framework that we would like to begin the conference today, to look really at what power has film and the arts had, what power can it have, and how might we be able to make some contributions to the global situation in the name of peace, using film, or at least trying to have different applications of film as we apply different strategies of culture diplomacy. So I thank you all for having come to this conference. I look forward to this chance to getting to know you. Hopefully during the coffee breaks and also the more informal times, we can talk one-on-one a little bit too. I'd love to learn from you. Why are you here? What are you most looking forward to? And I'd encourage you, don't let any of the speakers have peace, in the sense, ask questions, be involved, be proactive. And I think the discussions after the different speeches and presentations that we have will be equally important as the presentations themselves. So that's why I'm trying to be disciplined. I will stop there and hand over the microphone to our next speaker. I'd like to introduce also my colleague Radostina, who will be helping to serve as the primary moderator for the conference. And she's also somebody to go to in case you have questions regarding schedules, etc. She'll be with you the entire time. And I will be with you as much as I can also the coming days as well. So thank you again to everyone who has come. And I very much look forward to the journey we're about to embark on with the Film as Culture Diplomacy Conference taking place the next few days. Thank you very much.